And there's recording. Are you controlling my slides or am I going to click them?
I'm going to hand
Whatever
you
you
privileges,
want us
Robert.
to do.
You want, I'm sorry, Kevin.
I'm going to hand you privileges so you can go ahead and share.
Okay, great. I'll do that. That's easier for me.
And we are recording, Kevin?
Yes, that's going.
Okay, great. We're good to go. Thank you, Robert.
You're most welcome. So you should see my screen from idea to startup. All good? I'm assuming that's a yes.
I can see it, yeah.
Okay, good, thank you. So this is what I'm talking about today. So the entrepreneurship journey. How do you get to startup? Now, for many of you, you may be familiar with that already, but I'm going to take you down that path and kind of give you in 45 minutes a look of what that could be for you as a career path, or just if you have that entrepreneurial spirit within you. As Marion said at the beginning, I'm the executive director for Blackfire, and I'm actually speaking to you from Blackfire. I'm in my office at Blackfire. And if you don't know what that is, I'll tell you in a few minutes when we get there. So let me get back over here. There we go. So here's what I'm going to cover. So first of all, I'm going to give you a little bit more about specifics about how my background intersects with entrepreneurship. A little bit basic stuff on what startups are and why they're so talked about today and how they emerged as such a significant paradigm. What is that path as an engineer from the idea that you might create in, say, senior design to actually looking for funding for a startup to scale up to a commercial enterprise? What are some of the risks that you might face? And I'll be very honest with you on those and help you understand what the odds are really like in terms of you actually making it. I'll share some numbers with you. What resources are necessary? So I've done this, I mentor them, I coach them, and then we incubate them here. So there are a lot of resources that you have to think about that are necessary. Some of them aren't so obvious, and I'll cover those. And then probably what's most practical to you, what's the first step? How do you go down this path from ideation to actually forming an entity and doing a startup? And of course, I'm going to leave time for questions at the end. So Marion covered quite well, and I really am very humbled by what you say, my background. But you know, the common thread through all of that was interesting. The common thread is that I've always been very entrepreneurial. Even when I worked for large corporations like Las Vegas Sands, I always kind of looked at things that were happening and problems that I would encounter and kind of say, well, you know, is that really the best way to do this? Or could there be a better way? Why can't we try this? In 2013, when I was the Senior Vice President of Marketing for Sands, which you might know as Venetian and Palazzo, we held what was probably the very first esports tournament on the Strip. And at the time, no one knew what that even was. When you said esports to someone, you just got a blank look on their face. And it was because I sensed there was something beyond the monetary aspects of hosting an event, that there was something about video games, there was something about people who love to play video games or watch video games that could be unleashed into the environment, those entertainment environments of the Strip. I didn't know what the answer was, but I knew there was something there, that there was a problem that could be solved if maybe I began to look at this. So that's kind of the thread that has always been in my professional career, which I retired from to become an academic. And I had that entrepreneurial desire to kind of think, well, I'm going to try something. You know, I'm going to solve this problem a different way. What that really boils down to is I had this adverse reaction to status quo. It was probably the thing that was most irritating to me in my career, is when people said, yeah, but that's how we always did things. And I just could never accept that as an answer. It's just because you've always done it that way doesn't mean it is the best way. Now, there are certain things, of course, where safety are involved that's necessary. But in the context of an enterprise or an organization or a business, just because you've always done it that way doesn't mean it's always going to be that way. And there's some great research. And one of my favorite authors is Dr. Clayton Christensen. And Dr. Christensen, unfortunately, passed away earlier or last year. But he was fantastic. He wrote a book in 1995 called The Innovator's Dilemma. And The Innovator's Dilemma is one of the all-time best business books. People like Elon Musk were motivated by what Dr. Christensen first laid out. And some basic principles of what he talked about really lend themselves to this idea of entrepreneurship. In that book, I actually did read it in 1995. because it was on the New York Times bestseller list for one thing, so it caught my attention. And I read it, and it helped me understand why I thought the way that I did and why entrepreneurial thinking or innovation had always played a big part in my own DNA in the professional world. So, it kind of defined me. Well, move the clock forward to 5.5 years ago. And we have an entity aboard UNLV called the International Gaming Institute, and they are headquartered over in the Stan Fulton building, which is not too far from HRH. And it's over on the corner of Flamingo right there. You've seen the building 100 times. And the IGI is a center at UNLV that's about innovation in the gaming space, always been in the casino gaming space. And for 20 years, they've been inventing new casino games. They're starting to develop social games now, but that's kind of been their thing. And they've been very, very good at it because they had really good relationship with the industry and with the regulatory environment that industry was in. And 5.5, 6 years ago, our then Governor Brian Sandoval had brought to the IGI the idea that if you can innovate in gaming, can you innovate in the rest of hospitality and entertainment and retail? And the answer was, well, let's give it a shot. So that is where we converged, me and the IGI. And I became the director of the innovation lab for the IGI. And I've done that now for 5.5 years. And in that period, we've filed 17 patent applications. It's pretty good, considering about 100 students have come through my class, 17 patent applications, and they're in teams. So that's really pretty good. And they've been on a variety of different technologies, from algorithms to, hardware devices, et cetera. So as a result of that, the Hospitality Innovation Lab started to build a pretty good reputation as an entity within UNLV that took what you learned and applied it to real world problems. Why real world? Because that's where I came from. I haven't been an academic my entire career. I've only been an academic for 5 years. I came from the real world. I knew what those problems were, and I had access to the other individuals, CIOs, CTOs, CMOs, COOs, who could come into my class and speak and talk about the issues that they face that they can't seem to find a solution to. Or they go to vendors and they can't give them a better solution. So that led to, lots of innovation. Along that way, I brought back that idea of esports. And I approached my boss, who's Dr. Bo Bernard, who's our vice president of economic development, to say, let's do the same thing with esports. This is still a very big thing and not getting smaller, and it's global. And maybe we can find a way to innovate around esports well. And I'm not talking about just game development. I'm talking about the business of esports, the technology of esports, every aspect of it. So if you're an ME, but your passion is esports, is there a way that those intersect? And that's what we explored in that class, and we still do today. Well, all of those things led to this building that I'm in right now, the Blackfire Innovation. And you've probably heard about it. You may not even know where it is. It's not on campus. I'm actually about 5 miles away from campus, over by IKEA, right on the corner of Durango and Sunset. And the building just turned 1 year old. And we have a state-of-the-art lab here that has recreated an entire resort experience, from guest rooms to bars, kitchens, casino floor, esports lounge, digital media lab. All of that is recreated just on the other side of that wall. And as you can see behind me, some of the toys we have, I got a full body Tesla suit back there in the box. I've got a Pepper robot. So we got a lot of technology and tools here that are meant for the exploration of innovative ideas. And that's where all of this presentation kind of fits in. This place is built for you. This is the place where your ideas can help transform themselves and you into a startup. So let's get started with this. So what's a startup? So startup's really entrepreneurial activity, but it's important to realize that while startup activity is entrepreneurial in nature, not all entrepreneurial activity are startups. Good example, I want to open a new pancake restaurant. Is that entrepreneurial? Absolutely. Is it a startup? It's starting a new business, but not necessarily meets the definition of what we think of as a startup. Startup is technically used for a small business or enterprise that is doing something innovative, right? And there are different types of innovations beyond the scope of this little seminar for me to talk about that. But the goal of the startup is growth. We call it scaling. So how quickly can it scale? That's particularly important to people who invest in your startup, your investors, the funding you come from. They want to know how quickly can you scale your idea, which means how quickly can you grow the market for your product, or how quickly can you grow the size of your company so you're acquiring more and more and more users. However, there is a big difference. Now, even in the starting business world, like the pancake restaurant, there's a high risk of failure. But in the startup world, it's even more so, because many times you have people who are entering the space who have no prior experience in doing startups. So that's the business of being in business on top of the technology you're trying to push forward. So there's a very high failure rate. That's no secret to anybody. You look at any statistics, you look at TechCrunch, you look at Angel.co, you look at any of the media channels for startups, and you see that the failure rate is extremely high. However, what everyone's looking for is some success, getting some traction, and then everyone hopes to be what they call the unicorn, the one in a thousand, that truly takes off, that goes from a funding round of $500,000 to 10 million to 100 million, and the next thing you know, they got a valuation of $1 billion. An Airbnb story, an Uber story, a Tesla story, a SpaceX story. All of those are unicorns in the sense that they started as in this startup entrepreneurial activity, and then they were able to just hyper accelerate their growth. So one of the important things on startups, and I'm going to talk about this a little bit more in detail, is who succeeds and why do they succeed? Well, there are a number of reasons to it. The common mistake I see in many startups that I work with, and many of the groups that the pitch decks that I listen to, is that they don't understand that ultimately the success rate of startups is driven more by your business model than it is your product. You can have a fantastic idea, but if you don't have a solid business model to support that idea and take it to market, and when I say business model, I'm talking about several different components, from value proposition to customer identification and segmentation, to building the product itself, to how are you going to make money and what is it going to cost to make that money. All of those factors are in the business model, marketing, sales. And if you don't have a solid one underneath that, you could have the most beautiful, elegant piece of technology ever invented, but it's not going to work. It's not going to scale, because you need all of those other pieces in order to scale. And you find that's common in all of the success stories, that they scaled very fast because they had a great business model underneath it. In fact, there's a quote, and I don't remember who it's from, so you have to forgive me on this, but there's a quote that says, "I'll accept mediocre technology with a solid business model over fantastic technology with a poor business model." And so that reiterates what I was just saying, is that they have to work together. You have to understand that the design work that you could do, the idea you could come up with, is extremely important, but so is the business model that's going to underlie it and allow you to grow. So this is I hope you can see that. I got this off a web clip, so it's not really clear, but it's a stair-step example of the timeline for a typical startup, if you will, if there's such a thing as a typical. And on the vertical axis is profit, and on the horizontal axis is time. And what you see is the very first step is the exploration step. That's where you are as an engineering student in design. You are exploring. Like you have an idea. You think of a problem that you can solve, and then you engineer an idea to solve it, and then you prove that concept by working out something in the workshops and in your labs and with the mentoring of your professors. And then you present it at the end of that second semester, and they go, "Wow, this is a good idea." That you actually prove that this works. Your idea is validated. That's the first step. The second step is this deeper validation. That comes from experts in that industry, people who are actually doing that. And if you're fortunate enough, let's say in senior design, to have judges who are in that industry and give you direct feedback, then you're already stepping into that second step. And I've done that a number of times. I was honored to be a judge before. And when I would walk around and I was looking at the different projects, and I saw some of those that were related to either hospitality or entertainment or gaming or retail, whatever, wherever I had expertise, and I would give them feedback if I thought it was a great idea, if they really had something. And there were several cases where I was like, you should do something with this. This is a great idea. You're solving a very significant problem. This idea could scale quite easily. The next part after that is build. So build, we kind of think of that as the incubation phase. So incubation in the terms of startup sounds exactly what it means. Incubating. You're kind of like helping it develop, and you're taking it up to the prototype stage. The prototype stage is where you're actually getting ready to take it for serious investment. Up until now, investment will come from yourself. That's bootstrapping, crowdfunding. We all know what that is. Maybe you've got a rich uncle who made money yesterday not shorting GameStop. But you get my point. So you got someone who's funded you up to that point. Now they're probably going to take a significant piece of equity as a result, or it may be in the terms of a loan. But in any case, you've got some initial funding to get you that far. That's the incubation part. That gets you up to where you've got a solid, almost go-to-market prototype. You've got something that works. I can touch it, I can feel it, I can see it work, and I can understand how your project is going to enter the market. I get your value proposition. Then comes the launch, the early stage, and that's acceleration. That's where you actually have a product and you're taking it into the market and you're seeing what happens with the initial adopters of whatever it is that you've come up with. If it's software, if it's an application, then it's really the first set of users, the early adopters of your MVP, if you will. So you're measuring their feedback. You're probably giving it to them for free. You're not going to do a subscription model because nobody's going to pay for something that's not proven. But you're giving it away to get users. And you want users to give you feedback so that you can improve the next version. If it's a hardware device or something like that, you're testing it with the best possible customers you could find, the best feedback you can get so that you can, in turn, and that might be in the form of a pilot study. At that point, when you've got that data back and you know that there's a market for your product and you've got great feedback, is when you begin to do the fund pitches. So this is the investment pitch, right? So now you've got the venture capital firm like I'm a member of with Net Effect Ventures. And we're sitting in front of you and we're listening to you for 40 minutes, give your pitch. And at the end of it, we're going to bombard you with questions. We're going to see how well you know what you're talking about and what the chemistry is between the co-founders and whether we believe in you. Because I will tell you from the pitches I've sat in as part of a venture capital firm, it's about half the product and the pitch and half the people. Do we believe you can pull this off? We know you don't have any experience in doing this. Now, maybe you've got a co-founder now who has, and you've brought them in as a CEO because they've launched startups before. Fantastic. That de-risks it a little bit. But we want to know is, are you going to be able to pull this off? Can we trust you to do it? Do we believe in you? And that's half of it. I mean, even if you watch shows like Shark Tank, right, which is kind of an idealized version of this entire experience I'm telling about, you know, a lot of that happens is the chemistry. If the people who win Shark Tank tend to have really strong chemistry with the judges, right? They kind of like them, and they're all kind of very well prepared, and they all present very well. But you can tell that there's chemistry going on. So in a real pitch, those are real pitches, but in a VC pitch like the ones I've sat on, we're trying to see is that chemistry not only between you and us, but between each other. So that's a really good point, because at that point, if you're successful and they say, we like it, we're going to invest, you hit the growth stage. Now you need to hack your growth. How do you go from 10 to 1,000 to 10,000 to 100,000? So sales and marketing is a big part of what you're doing here. Product development, big part of what you're doing. Now you even begin to think about diversification. What else can you do with this technology and splintering and entering new markets? So at that point, you know, you have reached it. You're either going to succeed or, you know, the other. And fortunately, success can happen different ways. It can end up in an IPO, initial public offering. So going from being privately funded to being publicly funded in the markets. It's a big step. This is what makes billionaires and multimillionaires out of founders. The other is licensing deals or acquisitions, M&A, mergers and acquisitions. Google comes along and sees your idea and says, brilliant, we love it. We want to buy you. We want to buy your IP, want to buy your idea, and then maybe want you to come and work for us. So those are the possibilities. And I'm kind of generalizing, I know that, but this is just an overview. What are some of the risks? So one of the most important ones, and I find a lot of startups miss this one, and it's usually the first question I ask when I'm in a pitch is, tell me about your intellectual property. Well, what am I talking about? I'm talking about patents, copyrights, and trademarks. So if it's a patent, it's a piece of hardware. Have you filed a provisional patent? Or are you filing a patent on it? If you haven't, do you know if someone else has? Because if someone else has beat you to this, you got to stop right there because you do not want to infringe on somebody else's patent. That could get you sued. So intellectual property is a really important part, and many startups I found in terms of the pitches, they miss it. They're like, oh, we hadn't thought of that. Well, you need to think of that. And the time to think about it is as you're doing your research for your design projects right now. So second, what are the risks? Capital. You got to have cash, right? You're going to have to buy parts to put this thing together. Going to need some funding for this. Where does that come from? Maybe you got the rich uncle who made it yesterday, or maybe you just found an angel group, or maybe you found a program like we're building here at UNLV that is going to help you to accelerate and may possibly, through Rebel Venture Fund, take a stake in what you're doing. One of the other risks I see is a myopic vision. So what do I mean by that? So I've noticed with some of the teams that I mentor is that they get too focused on the product, right? Which is great. I'm glad you're focused on the product. I want you putting your intellectual capital to work on the product, but you've also got to think about everything else. Did you measure the market size? Have you really done the market research to convince me you know how big this market is? Is the market for this 1 million people or is it 10 million people? And how did you figure that out? And what supports your information on that? So myopic vision is being overly focused on the product to the detriment of everything else. When I was a Navy pilot, we used to call that target lock. And it meant that you were so focused on the target that you didn't see the enemy fighter plane that was right off your right lane. So you have to be aware of the environment. You have to kind of you do want to focus on this, but you also have a lot of other things to focus on as well. A good one is this a problem? Is there a problem there to be solved? When there isn't, that's called a technology push. And we see that a lot from big tech firms. And here at Blackfire, we've got tech partners in Intel, Panasonic, LG, and those are fantastic technology companies. But what they do is they create technology and they just push it into the marketplace. Many times it's just pushed at consumers, but they don't really fully know the application for it. They're pretty much just saying, hey, we've created a transparent OLED TV. You might want this for your house. Well, they introduced that at CES, 4 years ago? And so far it hasn't taken off. So people are saying, well, I don't really see the need for it in my house. So they still have the technology waiting for an application. So that's where that illustrates the concept of technology push. Pushing technology that's not really solving a problem. And in my class that I teach at UNLV, this is where we start, is diagnosing the problem, becoming an expert on the problem. By nature, we are not problem-seeking beings. We are solution-seeking beings. Seeking to analyze a problem is a very difficult intellectual exercise for us. We want to jump to the solution, and I would encourage you to stay focused on the problem. And this is an important thing in startups. It's too often that they don't really understand the problem they're solving, and they don't really get all aspects of that, particularly a major one like a regulatory problem. Can it scale? Means, can it grow? Can your idea take off? Is there room for it to expand both laterally in terms of other markets or other variations of the products that you might build, and vertically, meaning new markets, additional markets? So Marion talked about the provisional patent I have in wine technology. So the wine technology patent is using chemistry to evaluate the characteristics of wine through a mechanical device. So the initial market you see for that, we see, is probably a consumer. Helps you pick wines, helps you determine what you like. Great, takes the mystery away. But there are other applications. Detection of fraudulent wines. It's a very big criminal problem. Over here is the detection, measurement of wines, the quality of wines. So we can think of different segments here, and then vertically, maybe wine producers would like this to measure the quality of a particular batch. So that's where, can it scale? Absolutely. It can scale this way and it can scale this way. That's a great thing in a pitch because it shows investors that your company will continue to grow. You're not going to go like this, top out, and then fall off the edge of the cliff. Is there a business model? As you heard me say at the very beginning, this is a very important factor that we look for is, do you present that? And in fact, most of the venture capital firms, especially the big ones like Andreessen and Sequoia, they'll actually give you a deck format that actually says, hey, you got to present your business model. We're not even going to give you a second guess, second look. You're not even going to get a chance unless you've got a good solid one. So we're going to give you the format in the pitch deck to what actually present to us. As I said before, who are the team members? Are you complementary to each other? Or are you competitive with each other? Is there chemistry? We're saying, can you pull this off? Do we trust you? And as I said, can you do it? What are the odds? Not good. This is the harsh reality. So I'll give you an example of one Nevada accelerator that I'm very, very familiar with. They had over 200 applicants in their first year and a half, of which they accepted about 10% of them into their program. And they received some funding, they received space and a set period of time within which they were to incubate their idea up to the point where they were ready to pitch. Of that, less than 10% of them actually made it to the next step of getting funding. So the odds against you, but if you do make it, it's extraordinary. You may have just landed your own career. Resources are necessary, of course, knowledge, subject matter knowledge, which you're gaining in the College of Engineering. Business modeling mentorship, which is something I do in my class, which you can get in other classes at UNLV as well. But understanding the importance of the business model, I can't emphasize that enough. Prototyping, the engineering, you do that. That's what you do in senior design. You understand how to create a demonstrable example of the idea that you have, a proof of concept, if you will, even up to the point of a rough prototype. Resources necessary, capital. Maybe that capital comes from an incubator itself who gives you the capital to build and to work, or maybe it comes from external to you, or maybe you're just wealthy and you do it yourself. You need a facility, you need a lab, like Blackfire. That is a pitch for Blackfire, by the way, where you can do these things, where you're going to find resources where you can simulate the environments that you intend to be in and prove your concept and then ultimately demonstrate it to investors. Resources, you do need investors or investment funds at some points to scale because of just, you need money. And then of course, the pitch deck, which is how you articulate your concept to those investors. So I'm going to show you one. This is just kind of for fun here. Let's see, I'll have to switch screen here. All right. This is a pretty interesting one. You should be able to see this here. So here is Facebook's original pitch deck. One of the interesting things, I'm going to go through it really quickly, but what you find out is they start off, as all pitch decks do, is tell me what it is. What are you? So here they're kind of telling us that Facebook is this online directory that connects college students. That's all it started out to be. Okay, that's pretty easy to understand. I get that. Well, how does it work? Well, users create profiles. Oh, all right, here's an example of one. Yeah, you can't read it, but here's an example of a profile. And they maintain and update their own profile and they share it with other people. And it automatically connects them and it starts sharing information. You all know how social media works. I'm just going through their deck. It does a little bit of background here on how social media, there's actually a typo in here too, by the way. Don't have typos in your pitch deck, unless you're Facebook, I guess that's okay. So social networking, I explain it, but you kind of get this sense of what it is that they are beginning to explain. They're making the case for what it is that their idea is, and then boom, they begin to tell you how they're scaling. They're saying, look at the dates, if you will. So the launch date, by February 4th, there was Harvard, February 24th, Columbia, March 1st, Yale, March 7th came Dartmouth, March 7th came Cornell, March 14th was the University of Pennsylvania, April 4th. They are scaling like crazy. If I'm an investor looking at this, I'm like, oh my gosh, in the course of 2 months, you scaled through the entire Ivy League, essentially. So it's a good, and you can get a copy of my pitch deck here and continue looking at it. Actually, Airbnb's in there as well. there are a number of other initial pitch decks, but they give you the sense of what goes into a pitch deck and what makes a good one versus, what doesn't. And you'll find commonalities in the way they do it. That's part of what I do teach in my class. So let me get back over here again. Okay, so kind of winding things up so we can take questions. So what's the first step? Well, you're already doing it. You're doing an idea right now. You're creating a proof of concept, right? You are doing that in either design or a research project or just your personal interest, something you're doing in your garage, or your senior design. That is going to enable you to get some kind of evaluation, validation from someone external to yourself that it's a good idea. When those are great, we have the opportunity, Hal, and that's what I do here at UNLV, is this idea of the Blackfire Innovation Hub. So this coming summer, we will open an incubator. The incubator will be over at the Howard Hughes office complex, which is, again, it's pretty close, right on the corner of Koval and Flamingo. You know that big office complex back there behind Bahama Breeze. So we're opening an incubator in that space. Several thousand square feet, state of the art. It will be a spot that you would go to develop business models, to get mentoring, to really begin to work on that, on your idea to the stage that you're ready to go for investment. And then from there, if you have it and you've nailed it and you're investor ready, you graduate to the acceleration phase, which is here at Blackfire, where you're actually proving the concept and the idea. Actually, there's a first step, and this is a plug. So, and I've told Marianne about this, and I'll share it with you now. I'm going to do an innovation seminar for engineering students that's in much greater detail of everything I've covered today. We will go in deep detail on things from ideation to incubation, pitch decks, funding, LLCs, business organization, founder strategies, all of those things. I'm going to do that over 3 Saturdays. And you can see the dates there, February 13th, March 6th, and March 25th. It's a 6-hour, kind of an all-day Saturday. I know it's a lot, but it's a Saturday, so you don't have any classes. And it's here, right now, tentatively planned to be here at Blackfire. If we can't have it here, we'll go online. It's taught by me. I'll have a number of guest speakers, including venture capitalists, technology experts from the partners we have here at Blackfire, operators from the Strip, et cetera. It's an overview of the deep of tech commercialization and the startup process in great detail. By the end of this, you'll know exactly how to do a startup. The costs are free, except for the books, and they're about $45. It's one book, Dr. Christensen's book, and some case studies and other articles from Harvard Business Review. And that's your only cost. The rest of it is on me. Meals, if we happen to be in person, we'd be on your own, but we're right here at the corner of Durango and Sunrise, so there's plenty of restaurants all around us. If we're allowed to go in person, this is going to be limited to 16 students only, and it'll be first come, first serve for registration. There's an Eventbrite link that we'll share that you can register. Yeah, if you register, you're in there for all 3 sessions, so please don't register unless you're going to plan on attending all 3. If you complete all 3, you're going to get a certificate completion of the innovation workshop, which is going to look great on your CV. Trust me, a lot of my students, when they come out of my class in particular, and they highlight this, that catches the attention of recruiters, and it catches the attention of the hiring people. With that, we'll leave some time for questions. So let me stop sharing. And I'm back on the screen.
Robert, that was great. So yeah, students, this is your opportunity. We've got a few minutes to take a few questions. I love that you're developing a pipeline of sorts from senior design to incubation to acceleration. I think that's great. And I'm not sure how many people actually know you're doing this.
Well, it has been, we've been doing it, working on it now for well over 1.5 years. It's actually picking up steam right now because of our new president, President Whitfield, with innovation and entrepreneurship is one of his strategic pushes. So we're now getting more emphasis on this. Plus, we're all very cognizant of the economy and the recession that we're in. It becomes an alternate career path for some people, right? So the fact that we're putting all of the pieces finally together is really an extraordinary opportunity and an amazing resource that you find at schools like Duke and Stanford, Georgia Tech, who we have spent great deal of time working with them, understanding how they did that, and we're mirroring many of the things there. In fact, one of the things that we've done recently to help towards that end is we've finished a makerspace right here at Blackfire. And our makerspace has equipped everything from laser cutters to 3D printers, vinyl cutters, industrial sewing machines, a variety of tools. Oh gosh, we've got drawers full of Raspberry Pis, Adreno controllers, just all of the cool things that you need to prototype. We've now built them here. So we're building that entire ecosystem that will allow students to go from senior design to startup.
Wonderful. I think that's great. So I'm going to be quiet. Let's see. You guys can just unmute and ask a question, or you can type it in the chat.
So I have a question. Say we're
Yes.
a sophomore ME student. Are we allowed to use the labs, or do we have to wait to become the seniors?
So the answer is kind of neither. So the students that are using the labs are probably already working on some kind of project. So if you were working on a project already, and that project was either accepted to come into the incubator, because you can imagine that incubation is a process, as I had mentioned with the Nevada Accelerator, where you apply and then not everybody gets accepted because we don't have the physical space for that. But if your team or your idea got accepted, then you get a key card and you come and we start working together. But ideally, you think, or not even ideally, from a practical sense, there's going to be a lot of that space is going to be taken up by the teams that are coming out of senior design, because there are a lot of them who we've identified as these are high, they have a high potential for commercialization. So you're asking me, let's see, Hayden's asking which class do I teach at UNLV? So I actually teach a class called the Innovation Lab. It's in the hospitality college because we started with hospitality, but it wasn't limited to hospitality students. It's HMD 455, and there's a graduate version, HOA 555, that I teach. They're concurrent. We just met last night, and I typically get several engineering students who take the class as an elective in the last semester. And enjoy it. I'm working with a group of them right now who are in a pre-seed startup phase. They want to take their idea commercial, and I'm working with them here at Blackfire. Let's see, when creating a product, how do I check if patents of that product exist? And if it doesn't exist, how would one go on creating a patent? Excellent question. So you can actually go on the USPTO, US Patents and Trade Office, and they do have a search capability. And you can search keywords. So you would kind of take the keywords, like I would put wine or wine technology in a keyword search, and a bunch of results are going to come up. And you're going to have to learn to do patent speak to read through them to figure out if any of those kind of match up to what you're doing. So that's kind of the easiest way. The secondary way is everybody's favorite search engine. Just kind of go out there and see what's in that space that you're thinking about doing. And I'll tell you, this is a good side story that illustrate what we're talking about. So we have a provisional patent on our technology. And I noticed on a Instagram ad that was targeted at me because I follow lots of people who talk about wine. Somebody was selling a wine device that did some chemical measurements on the wine. And so I bought one. And lo and behold, no patent on it. So we may have a patent infringement on our technology because they're purporting some of the things that we do. So there are ways to check for patents. Now, the most accurate way is to hire a patent attorney. That's costly. The team I'm working with right now, who has a patent in it's a hardware device. We talked to a patent attorney in Southern California who specializes in that sort of thing. And his fee for actually searching, submitting, and then managing the patent process was about 20 grand. So it was pretty expensive. Now you can file your own patent. There's nothing, many people have done that. The patent process is complicated, but you can file your own, and people have. UNLV does have programs where UNLV may assist you with the filing of a patent, depending upon the commercial viability of your idea. And that's done through this office of people on here, the Office of Economic Development. And they write a number of those projects every year. And there's different ways that the sharing of the actual ownership of the patent happens, et cetera. So multiple ways, but patents are important. Next question here is, would participating in the seminar series be necessary if we'd take your tenure course in the future? Great question. No, because the seminar series is a scaled down version of my course run over 3 weekends instead of over a semester. So you'd be getting a repeat, unless you wanted to take my course for credit. The seminar series is not for credit. We'll give you a certificate about the end, but my course is 3 credit hours, either undergrad or graduate. What about intellectual property? So that's patents, copyrights, trademarks, really important. Also, one of the really good things, I'm glad you asked about intellectual property. Intellectual property is an asset. It's worth something. So even as a startup, if you have a patent, you've got something of value. You can sell that patent. Google has a division within Google who do nothing but evaluate and buy IP. They go out and buy it. And so it's not saying there is a market for whatever it is that your patent. I'm just saying there is the process where patents are bought and sold. Is the same process. Let's see. Okay, course number again is HMD 455 is the undergraduate. HOA 555 is the graduate course. Is it the same process as patents? Is what the same process as patents? Copyrights and trademarks? If that's your question, no, they're different. Copyrights are relatively easy to do. So as you're doing things, let's say you do a SolidWorks design for your prototype, and that piece of paper that you've done or that digital file, you can copyright because it's the same. Oh yeah, I see. Is intellectual property the same as patents? Patents are intellectual property, but there are other types of intellectual property as well. Copyrights and trademarks. Let me go here. China doesn't respect intellectual property? That's true. They don't respect United States patents, but you can file a patent in China. And in fact, the way we've approached our wine technology is that we've filed multiple patent applications around the world. We've actually picked out every country that has a wine growing region, and we've filed patent applications in those countries. In some countries, they make it easier by allowing you to do one application that's good for all of them. Others say, nope, you got to use ours, like the United States says, nope, you got to use ours. China says, you got to use ours. But you can file intellectual property in China if you think that's going to be a market for you. If you file a patent in the United States, you are protected from something being counterfeited in China and being sold in the United States that infringes on your patent. You could seek recourse for that. But if you don't have a patent in China, you're exactly right. Somebody can knock off, and likely, if it's a good idea, will knock off your idea, manufacture it, and sell it over there. So depending on what it is, you might want to, you might want it. You just keep in mind, it is costly. None of these things are free. Investors, whether or not they want to fund patents really depends on the strength of the patent and how big that market is you might be going into. If it's a market like China and there is a huge potential upside that you could reach and capture some of that market, they might fund it because they can get quite, as I said, quite expensive. Thank you for all the, oh, you're most welcome. We can share my email contact information. I'm robert.rippee@unlv.edu. It's RIPPEE. And I'll share my PowerPoint slides so you can go back and look at everything as well. And you can click on that hyperlink and go look at Facebook and Airbnb's pitch decks as well. Other questions? If the coin goes to the moon, I'm funding for idea. You can fund my idea too. Okay, we'll take investors for the patent. That's it right there. Robert.Rippee, UNLV. Thank you, Marian.
Absolutely. Thank you, Petar. Yeah, this was great. I've always loved your presentations, Robert. I learned something new from them every time. Do you want to plug the 3 Saturday series one more time before we?
I do. And I will, you know what, let me post the Eventbrite link. That'll be a good thing.
Yeah, that's a good idea. So How many folks, just curious, how many people are thinking about taking the 3 Saturday classes? Just be curious, raise your hands or whatever. Yeah, cool. Awesome.
And there's a nice picture of Blackfire on the Eventbrite link. So 3, 2, 1, it's coming, it's coming, it's coming. There it is.
There you go,
So,
guys.
again, I hope you take my seminar. Whether I'm hoping I don't have to put it online. I do not. I mean, I teach online sometimes. I love being in person, and we've got a facility here that allows us to because we're a lab, and we've got plenty of space in our esports arena for the 16 people. You'll be 6 feet apart, and you'll love the arena. It's freaking gorgeous, beautiful wall-to-wall screens, and you'll enjoy just being in this building. It's so much fun, and everyone that comes in is just, they're like, wow, I didn't even know we had this. Like, well, we've only had it for a year, but you'll enjoy it. And I look forward to, if you're taking it, you'll feel very rewarded, you'll feel great, and you'll have a good knowledge of this entire process. Anything else?
Robert, you're a superstar. We are so glad that you kicked off our webinar series this spring. Thank you so much for your time, for your energy, for your insight, for inspiring our students to get innovative and thinking outside the box. It's something they do beautifully anyway, but it always helps to get some outside advice from time to time. I do want to quickly plug that we've got a very full semester of webinars. You're going to hear coming up next from David Doyle of ProCaps Labs. When he wrote us and said, yeah, I'll do a webinar, I was like, what is ProCaps Labs? They do nutritional supplements,
Oh yeah.
meal replacement bars, protein shakes, all that. And they're going to hire a ton of mechanical engineers because their products are flying off the shelves. So he's going to come up and speak February 10th at 4 o'clock. We've got Sam Palmer with the Clark County Building and Maintenance Department. He's going to do a piece on, I think he's going to be talking about networking and some general ways to fill out applications properly and things like that. Doa Ross with the Las Vegas Valley Water Department. She's a huge political force in Clark County. She's going to do a presentation March 2nd on breaking the mold of a traditional engineer. So that should be very interesting. DraftKings is going to join us on the 24th at 3 p.m. And Paul Reams with Treasure Island, he's going to be hitting the entertainment engineering and design students and talking about branding. That's what we have so far, and we're booking more all the time. So it's going to be a full semester, but you kicked us off, got us off to a great start. We're really, really appreciative. Thank you, everybody, for showing up. We can't do the workshops without the students. So we really appreciate you. Thank you, Kevin, being our technical director and making sure the audio and everything was great. And we'll see you next time.
Take care. Be safe, everybody.